everybody. My name is Bob Nideffer, and I've probably been in sports psychology or involved in the field longer than most of you have been alive. At any rate, I want to thank Christina for creating this opportunity for all of us to get together. And yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting up with some old friends. I noticed Ann is on the line, and I was in on Herb's presentation and appreciated his plug. At any rate, let me get us started here. In my ideal world, what we would be doing today is basically just sitting one-on-one, me with one-on-one with each of you. Ideally, so I could hear what your concerns are and try and respond, answer questions, and function in that way. In getting ready for today, the hard thing for me was, trying to figure out how much structure should I provide, and how can we interact together. So I do want to encourage all of you to feel free to interrupt, ask, or type in questions. I will try and do my best to respond to them. I view this really as a learning experience for all of us. I know I can learn from each of you, and I'm sure you can learn from each other. So I hope we'll be able to do that. I have provided some structure, that revolves around mental rehearsal, attention control training, and if we get to it, relationships. If we don't get to all of your questions as we go through this process, I would ask you to email them to me. I'm going to be on next Saturday as well. And so any questions that you have that don't get answered today, if you can send them to me, then I can make an effort to deal with them next Saturday. Let me move us along here. I want to cover a couple of topics here. With the mental rehearsal, hopefully we'll get into talking about it for developing new skills and for executing existing skills. And then with attention control training, I want to talk about it for how you use it to optimize the initiation of an activity and for breaking negative feedback loops during competition. I think my wife Roz kind of talked a little bit about that, but probably not in the same way that I would be talking about it. And to set the stage for this, what I want to do is I want to show you this short video. I think it'll generate some questions, some conversation, but it also provides a jump-off point for discussing mental rehearsal and attention control training. This dive took place back in 1983, and I'll just let the video speak for itself here.
Just to ask him about his confidence and his preparation.
Ken, I've been feeling really good. I guess for the first time that I've been doing these world records, this will be number 7 for me, that I finally inside realized that I'm going to have to take a few months' time preparation beforehand. And that's exactly what I did. I went up into the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. I used the University of Virginia Tech's facilities. They were very cooperative and let me in there. And I feel really good. I feel real strong. My 130-foot dive was really good. I have to admit, though, when I got up there and looked down and went, yeah, this is it again, Last year I said I wasn't going to be up there, and then my phone rang off the hook for about 2 weeks until after I decided that I was going to retire. And every time I pick up the phone, I went, okay, you knuckleheads, I'm going to do it again one more time. And I feel real good. I took the time, I have to say, though, I took the time to go out and prepare myself mentally and physically. And I think it's helping out a lot.
Dana Kunze, knees taped, ankles taped, several suits on. And he is no newcomer to this event. He's been world target diving champion, world high diving champion, has more records than anyone else in the sport of high diving.
Dana, this is Ken Sitzberger and Diana Nye at poolside. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
How do you like your position, buddy?
Well, I feel real strong on my first dive.
Mm-hmm.
And The scores have been kind of low, so I'm hoping that I can get a good dive in there and up that scores a little bit. I need a win real bad.
Dana, that's all I was going to ask you. You've seen the other dives, and everybody was fairly safe, but nobody really put one in there.
Yeah, that's true. Golly, I'd like to put one in there.
All right, we'll wish you good luck, and go for it, buddy.
All right, thanks a lot, man.
He's trying not to be too exuberant, but I know from my experience with Dana over the last 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years that he loves his position. He's the second to last diver. If he does a good dive, there's a good chance the last diver will scratch. He's a Pat Picard's a rookie, and if Dana nails one, which he's very, very capable of doing, the competition will be over.
And don't forget that these divers are not only athletic competitors, they're performers. They go all over the world, the Oktoberfest in Germany, etc., performing for the crowds. And they know how to salute, and they know how to give a smile even when they're hurting, when they hit bottom.
His dive is far more difficult than any dive that the other competitors have used. It's a reverse triple somersault. Baccia did a single somersault, and most of the other competitors did double somersaults. He's doing a reverse triple somersault back towards the platform.
You can see him going through some of his arm movements. There he
Good
goes.
jump. He's in good shape. He knows where it is. All right! He drilled it. The new champion. There is one more diver, but I don't see any way that he can top that dive. One thing you gotta say about Dana is when he is bad, he's bad, but when he is good, he is awesome.
Even before he saw his scores, Dana knew he nailed that dive, and now he's sitting pretty in first place. Very popular with the crowd and the other divers. He sees his scores, 27 points. Dana Kunze leads the competition.
Dana got to keep 3 nines on that dive, and I really didn't see too much wrong with it. Maybe his arms went up a little bit on the finish, right after the second somersault, right here. But boy, did he get a good entry. Once again, 172 feet, solid jump, solid spin, solid interruption. Sees the water, comes out, and he knows where he is, and he drilled it.
If we could take a look at Dana Kunze right now, look at the tape on the knees. Absolutely in shreds, and that's all from the impact. That tape was tight, absolutely bandaged tight around his knees before he went.
Thoughts, comments, questions? You can probably push your space bar and speak if you want to. I'm getting, I'm shook, amazing, wow, just wow. I love the attitude.
The guy who gave 7.5 has got to be insane.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
What did you notice when he was standing up on the platform, apart from his, seeming to really enjoy what he was doing? He had to look up to look at the television camera and the speaker, which he did when he said, boy, I'd like to nail one. But what did you notice about his preparation and stuff up there at the top of the tower?
It looked like he was mentally working through what he was about to do over and over and over again. I could be wrong, but that's what it looked like to me, that he had mentally gone through this already and he was running that just before actually doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Adrian. He was rehearsing, if you will, what he was doing. Did you notice anything specific about the rehearsal? Any of you?
He was doing his deep breathing,
Okay, he needed the breathing to settle himself down at the outset. That's a good point.
Given
right on.
Given
ahead.
attention to detail, all the details that probably go into the somersault and the specifics of the dive.
Yeah, that's great. If we were to go back and replay this video right now, if you were to time the arm movements with the length of time it actually took in the dive, you would see that he's spot on. In other words, the mental rehearsal that he was going on was in perfect timing with the actual dive itself. So it was in real time. It wasn't slower, it wasn't faster. It was spot on to exactly what he was going to be doing through that dive. And that's what we'll get to that as far as a part of a rehearsal process. He could do that with this dive because he'd done that triple somersault, not from that height, but he had done that triple somersault time and time and time again. That was automatic for him. And he had a qualifying dive at 130 feet where he went through the same dive. Anything else that you might have noticed?
I was wondering if there were factors in the environment he's waiting out. Is there wind? Is there sun? Are there things that he's feeling for?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, I actually happened to be in San Diego and was there and taking pictures at the time. And I went back home. It was broadcast the next day on ABC or whatever, NBC, I don't know which one. And some of the questions that were being asked of the divers just scared the hell out of me, because they would get a diver up at the top of the tower and then they would ask a question. Like one of the divers, for example, was doing a takeoff from a handstand. So if you can imagine doing a handstand at 172 feet in the air and then doing the dive. And so one of the announcers asked the diver as they're trying to get ready, you know, gee, your takeoff is different from the other divers. Is there any chance of that cable getting in the way? And on another diver, they asked a question like, you know, well, how windy is it, and could you miss the pool entirely? And if you want to think of a horror story and you want to put a negative thought in somebody's mind, I mean, you couldn't pick a better time to do it than that. And so somehow, you know, they have to be able to get rid of those thoughts, you know, break that. And, you know, practically that's kind of part of what we want to be talking about today. Any other thoughts or questions that you have? Right.
Yeah, I would say his ability to shift between internal and external focus, you know, talking to the camera and then waving at the crowd, and then going back into his routine. His ability to shift seems like very efficient.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, he obviously wouldn't have been able to complete the dive successfully if he hadn't been able to do that. And as you heard him say at the start, he had taken actually months to prepare, to get ready for this, practicing, rehearsing, things that he couldn't do. I mean, you know, just imagining in his own head, trying to set a world record at 172 feet, if you will. Let me go to the next slide here. So let's talk about, and again, I want to encourage you to feel free to jump in and ask questions as you try and relate to it. But let's start out with the mental rehearsal aspect. And I mentioned that, you know, that we use mental rehearsal both for developing new skills, but also for executing the skills that you've worked at to the point that, you know, you should be able to do them blindfolded without having to think about them at all. But there are some differences in the rehearsal process depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and trying to do. So, for example, for the development of new skills, typically we break those skills down into segments. And and you practice one part at a time. A player trying to learn a serve in tennis might just rehearse the ball toss, and then add another part to it to eventually reach the point of going through the whole service motion and the approach to the net and whatever else is involved. So you can break apart things and learn, and then you can rehearse putting those pieces together. Ideally, you want to get to the point where, as you saw Dana up at the top, you're able to rehearse the whole sequence in real time, and then just practice that process over and over and over again. We were talking about, one of the whole reasons for having these sessions had to do with this pandemic and the fact that your practices may be interrupted, and what can you do? And so mental rehearsal can be a big thing for you to do, practicing your moves and whatever your sport is, when you can't actually get on the court. The speed of the rehearsal process, if you're segmenting the, if you're just learning it, obviously you're gonna be going through the motions a bit slower and you're gonna pick up speed as you get closer to real time. The completeness of the process and the modalities used. What you saw at the top of the tower was Dana was using not just visualization, but he was also using kinesthetic cues. He was actually making the arm movements that he was going to make in the dive. And obviously, it should be obvious that anytime you're engaging in a rehearsal process, the closer it can be to the real thing, the better it's going to be for you in terms of the speed with which you're rehearsing it, in terms of your involving kinesthetic cues, and all of that stuff. Eyes open, eyes closed when you're engaging in a rehearsal process. Anybody have any, you guys have done your own rehearsal. How many of you are comfortable with rehearsing with your eyes open? Any comments on that? Reactions? If you try and rehearse something with your eyes open, do you find yourself getting distracted?
Not necessarily.
No? You're able to do it, Anna?
Yeah, for golf, for example, do that.
Okay, but then you've got are you doing the rehearsal on the course? Are you talking about just before a swing or whatever? Okay, so.
Yeah, like you're on the course or you're on the putting green and you just sort of clue it out. That takes practice, and one place a lot of practice for that type of thing is in yoga. So I mean, it's been a practice for a long time, and you can just have a lot of people making a lot of commotion around you and still not see them or hear them. So it just is practice.
Do you think that would be the same for you if you were practicing your golf swing in a classroom with your eyes open?
I think it's the same, but I notice the difference. And I notice the amount of effort required when the eyes are open as opposed to when they're closed. Okay. And I notice different things. I notice different things about myself with the eyes open or closed. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think the issue that I'm trying to get to, and I'm trying to see if some of you have some suggestions as to what works for you and those kinds of things. From my perspective, there are some pretty big individual differences in terms of how people rehearse and what facilitates that rehearsal process. Did somebody want to say something?
Bob, Nick Molinaro.
Yeah, hi Nick.
Bob, how are you?
Good.
So what I do mostly with golfers is that they'll do with eyes open and eyes closed. So the simple drill would be a 3-foot putt, and that you're practicing, that you're actually making 6 3-foot putts with your eyes open, 6 3-foot putts with your eyes closed, and then alternating between both of those. With the task of being able to focus on the proprioceptive feeling with your eyes open. So I'd like to do small movements first, so that's why I'll start off with putting. I'll do this, then with a full swing, but we'll break that down into chunks. So it'll be taking away like to the inside and maybe putting a peg in the ground about where you want the club to be on the backstroke, taking it slightly to the inside with your eyes closed, getting a sense of what that feels like, and then opening up and seeing whether you're there, and then repeatedly first close, then open, and then open and close, so that you can build the transition so you can actually get a better sense of what it's feeling like with your eyes open.
Oh, that's a great, I haven't thought about that. That's a great thing to do, especially, if you want to help get the person get the feeling for, just the strength of what they're putting into the swing, into the putt, to actually feel that. That's great.
It worked very well with putt, and also worked very well with the tour player. He couldn't get the parallel. And so when I had him close his eyes, he couldn't even get the parallel. We got him in front of a mirror and eventually taught him what it would look like with his eyes open, look into the mirror, close his eyes, and then try to get him to have the proprioception of getting the club to parallel. And he eventually got that. And after about 45 minutes, he picked up about 3 to 5 miles an hour on a swing, just getting it to parallel with that technique.
Wow, that's great. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or comments?
I think when I do things,
Clarify. So you're suggesting using both eyes open and eyes closed, but initially using it sounds like eyes closed, then moving to eyes open. Is that correct?
Well, Nick is saying he found that very helpful, and he's used that in a systematic way that I makes a whole lot of sense from my perspective in golf. I've never done that. Personally, what I find is it's much easier for me to rehearse with eyes open because I'm able to use environmental cues to help me, even if I'm not in the actual environment itself. An illustration for me would be, I remember as walking down the hallway in school, mentally dribbling a basketball, using the kids that are walking down the hall as other players and driving around them and heading for the basket. So you're actually walking, but I'm in my mind, I am playing basketball and I'm using the kinesthetic cues. And so I'm using my environment to help facilitate that rehearsal process. And that's just easier for me than just closing my eyes and mentally seeing myself go through it. That's much harder for me to do.
And the kinesthetic cues is simply the feeling. You're trying to get the feeling of what it feels like, right?
That is much easier for me. Yes, I want to get that feeling, and it doesn't have to be exaggerated. So, for example, I could then sit down in my classroom, and having done that, I could also see myself dribbling in the classroom around the desks with my eyes open. I could, I would never leave my seat, but there would be subtle kinesthetic cues. So if the teacher had actually seen beneath my desk, they would have seen my hand dribbling the ball a little bit, and they would have seen my legs moving a little bit as I was using those kinesthetic cues in real time to rehearse that.
Right. The body movement is the kinesthetic cues right there, the actual body movement.
Right.
Right.
And,
now,
and a lot of the great athletes that you run into are they're rehearsing all the time.
Right. One question on that is, do you have any preference on an internal view versus an external view for visualization?
Again, my personal preference is to see things. I'm in my own body and I'm seeing things the way I see them if I'm actually in the situation.
Which would be internal view then, right?
I'm looking out at the world.
Okay. That's internal then.
But that's my preference. There are other people who, will find it easier, I think, to do some other kinds of thing.
Okay. The external view of like watching yourself on a video, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if we get to, this last thing I talk about paired with music to manage mood and timing. Some of you listened to my wife's, you probably got a better glimpse into our marriage than I did. You might have heard her presentation before mine, and I know she told a story about the beer, which wasn't necessarily the best sports psychology advice in the world at that point in time. but I should also warn you there, you can't be a sports psychologist and a husband at the same time. It doesn't work. You know, a lot of athletes, you know, we've gotten into the noise in tennis and that kind of thing, but you know, what people are doing is they're coordinating breathing with the movement and with the, you know, trying to manage that. And part of the rehearsal process for me was, one of the things that I find helpful is that I'm able to use music to control my mood and to control the timing of things. So that one of the things that, for example, I suggested to my wife, and I don't think she ever used it, but she was struggling and had lost confidence, and I just wanted to get her again focused on external kinds of things. But I told her to start singing to herself while and just let herself play, but in her head, start singing Raindrops on Roses and Whiskers on Kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, as she's running up to hit the volleys and all those kinds of things, and time her singing with the movement on the tennis court, just to get her out of her head and out of the negative thinking, and allow her body to perform. And a lot of athletes can use music in that kind of way, and they pick particular music for particular moods and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, those are all things that you want to be thinking about as you're thinking about engaging in the mental rehearsal processes. Any other questions? All right, let's move on here. What I want to do now is I want to talk about center of mass, centering. Most athletes have a pre-start, if you will, routine. Whether you're a golfer or, you know, a diver like Dana, you basically have a time period that you're using to get yourself set up to initiate the activity, whatever the activity is you're going to do. And that could be long and drawn out. It could be relatively short. But that time frame that you're using, what you're trying to do, and most athletes either do it by accident because superstitions cause them to create a basically preparation period, if you will. So if you watch a basketball player go up to the line to shoot a free throw, that basketball player has a routine that he goes through as he gets ready to shoot the free throw. If I watch a high jumper out at a track and field meet, that high jumper will go get ready to, and they'll have a preparation period where that they're going through to just prior to the initiation of their approach to the bar. And a hitter in baseball will, you know, they'll get into the batter's box and they'll go through a routine as they settle into the batter's box. So within sport, at different points in time, you have those pre-start kind of periods where you're really trying to get yourself in that optimal state of readiness, if you will. And just for the moment, imagine that optimal state of readiness is a feeling that just says, I'm okay, you know, I'm ready. You get up there, the basketball player walks up to the line, they take a deep breath or whatever, they dribble, and then there's this feeling that just says, yep, it's, you know, it's okay, and you shoot. And if you're really having that feeling, you know the ball's going to go in before it even leaves your hand. You know it felt good. You went up there, you got to the line, you got ready, and you took the shot, and you knew it was in. And so what we have are those pre-start routines that, as I say, can be fairly complicated or can be very short. And whatever it is, the whole issue from the athlete's standpoint or from a coach's standpoint is, you know, what happens to the athlete when they don't get that feeling? Why don't they get that feeling, and what do they do? You know, as long as your routine is working, there's no issue and you start. But during a lot of times that's not the feeling that you get. You get up there, you dribble the ball 3 times and it just doesn't feel right. So you add a 4th or a 5th. And what we want to do, what we want to be able to do with athletes is we want to be able to get them to recognize when they're not feeling what they want to feel, how to correct it, how to get back to that feeling. And because most of those preparation periods kind of develop automatically, most athletes really don't know what it is that causes them to feel one way or the other. They recognize it when they get up there, but when they get up there and they don't feel the way they want to, they don't know what's wrong. They don't know how to make that adjustment. So as we talk about centering and that kind of thing, your center of mass is this magical point in the middle of your body. I put it up here on the slide where if you divide your body, 50% of the weight's above the line, the horizontal line, 50% below, 50% on the right side, and 50% on the left side. And someplace in the middle there is your theoretical center of mass. And that center of mass, whatever your activity is at the place that it needs to be at when you have that centered feeling. So when you're feeling confident, I know that I'm ready and I feel confident, you're centered. Now, what you need to discover is, okay, well, what's my weight distribution like at this point in time? Because it's going to vary from sport to sport or situation to situation. And so if I'm going to figure out what's wrong, I've got to understand what it is that affects that. So centered is a feeling and centering is the process you go through to achieve the feeling of being centered. Now let me use baseball as an example here. Everything that a baseball hitter does revolves around his body movements around his center of mass. And strength, the ability of the athlete to make contact with the ball, the timing, everything has to be coordinated with respect to the body's movement around the center of mass. So, for example, if you just think about a baseball player stepping into the batter's box for a minute. If they're feeling centered, okay, then they're comfortable, they're ready for the pitcher to deliver the ball. Now, what happens is when an athlete gets anxious, muscle tension increases, and that results in a slight increase in the center of mass. So what you see is the athlete, when they're anxious, their weight is a bit high. The center of mass is just a little bit high because of the increased muscle tension that's happened there. And what there's a tendency to do when that athlete, as the pitcher goes forward, if the athlete is anxious, if their attention is directed externally, they're not caught up in negative thinking at this point in time, chances are with that anxiety and the weight being a bit high, they're going to come through too quickly. They're going to be aggressive and they're going to swing before the pitch even gets to the plate, before the ball gets to the plate. They're going to rush. If, on the other hand, they're in their head, their weight's too high, they're feeling anxious, the anxious feeling causes them to start to ruminate, you know, what do I do to settle down? They're not ready for the pitch. Their weight's still back on their back foot. In either case, they're slow to swing. If they make contact, they foul the ball off. Here, they swing early, miss. If the weight drops too low, they're in the batter's box. Again, they're not ready. So what you have to do in order to determine what your center of mass is basically figure out what is the weight distribution in the position that this athlete's in. So if I've got a basketball player. I'll have him go to the line, and I'll ask him how much of the weight's on the right foot and the left foot. I'll ask him to get ready to do his free throw, and from that position, I'll say, okay, what's your weight distribution on your 2 feet? And now what I want you to do is I want you to relax a little bit, bend your knees, lower your center of mass a little bit, see what that feels like. Okay, now straighten up a little bit, see what that feels like. Okay, now drop back into that position that feels most comfortable for you. So what the athlete's got to learn is they've got to learn the kinesthetic feelings associated with the weight distribution, how much of it's on the front foot, how much it's on the back foot, or, you know, on the left and right, depending on what the position is. If it's a football player and they're in the position at the line and they're in a 3-point position, they've got one of their hands down and their center of mass is, then where's the weight distribution between your hands, your 2 feet, and that kind of thing. So that if they then get into a situation and they're feeling out of place, they know they're not comfortable, they know what to do to get back into it. They know how to make that adjustment. Do you have any questions about that? Reactions, thoughts? No.
So these are all techniques to help maintain motivation, correct?
This technique, the idea of adjusting center of mass is, you know, when you're working with an athlete, or if you are an athlete, you're sitting there and you're going out, there are times when basically what you're feeling with the kinesthetic feedback that you're getting from your body is telling you, look, I'm not ready. So for example, like I said, I'm feeling a little bit tight today. I'm anxious. I get out there, I'm aware of the fact that I'm anxious. Now I start getting caught up in this loop. Oh, I'm anxious. Well, you know, I'm not paying attention to the external cues. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. So what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to make the adjustments in my physiology. By doing that, I'm breaking out of the feedback loop that's starting to develop in my head. So, you know, I'm breaking that little feedback loop. And then what I have to do is I have to attend to a process, what we call a process cue, to an external cue that is critical to the execution of my skill, most critical to the execution of my skill, whatever that might be. I'm sure Nick could offer some process cues for a golfer relative to their golf swing or whatever it is that they might attend to, in order to, once they've settled themselves down, now what's the most important swing key for this individual in this shot? What should they direct their attention to? So they go up to the ball, they get in position, they adjust their weight distribution, they attend to that cue, and then they get their stroke. The hitter in baseball, the most relevant thing is picking up the pitch as it comes out of the hand of the pitcher. So they make their adjustment, they try and time that adjustment to the pitcher going into his windup, and then they direct their attention to the release of the ball from the hand of the pitcher. In tennis, you're sitting there with an athlete who, let's say they're serving, they get back to the line, they make adjustments in their weight distribution so they feel comfortable, and then the ball toss becomes maybe their attention, because if the toss is in the right place, so there's some aspect or some technical thing that the coach might have them cue in on as the most relevant cue for the execution of the particular skill, for the start of what they're doing. So would be, let's say, the toss of the ball. And then given that you're in that position, then the hope is that throughout that point, you've initiated it at the right time, you've hit the ball where you wanted to, your focus is external. It ought to be kept external, hopefully will be kept external simply by the fact that you're involved in that play. Am I making sense? Yes, no?
Yes, making sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. we're going to move on here. What I want to do, Herb Martin talked about relationships a bit with you guys, and what I want to do is I want to talk about the importance of relationships, because whether you're an athlete or a coach or whatever, you don't get to the top of the heap alone. And most of the people, I can probably count the number of complete athletes that I've encountered over 50 years. By complete, I mean, they don't need any help from anybody with respect to the psychological or physiological side of the spectrum. They take care of everything. They manage everything. You can count them on two hands. Most of us fall short in one area or another. And our success depends upon our ability to find ways of managing that short area, if you will, maximizing our strengths and minimizing our weaknesses. Relationships become really important in that. The relationship between a coach and an athlete. I mean, most of the coaches the really good coaches that I know will go into, I remember talking to a basketball coach who was saying, look, our center is the weak part of the team. So I have to design a strategy that takes the center out of the game, if you will. We've got to be able to work around that relative weakness, or we've got to be able to protect that individual so that that the opposition can't take advantage of the weakness that we have. So a coach would be helping in that kind of way. Other ways, if you just take and I say, okay, physically, do I have everything? Well, my size might be a little small. I might not have all the speed I need, but boy, have I got heart. And then you've got the other athlete. I remember an athlete that I was working with who was in our elite sprint camp. And he ran 110 flat. He could long jump 27 feet, and he was a 7-foot high jumper. He's in college, and he's a track team. And the problem, he comes to me, and the problem is that he has no self-discipline. He does all of that on just natural physical talent, an incredible talent physically, but couldn't get himself to practice. And the coach allowed him to miss practices because he was getting so many points for the team. He didn't get beyond, he made it into the elite group because he had the times and stuff to do it, but that was pretty much the end of his career because there was a lack of self-discipline. Didn't have what it took. Ideally, he could establish a relationship with someone who would provide that, help him provide that discipline for himself, but it would mean giving up control. And so the relationships that we have with people are really, really critical. Because no matter how good and self-contained you are, there are going to be times when, your energy, your will, your heart, your confidence just isn't there, at least for yourself. I want to play a video for you, and then we can talk about this.
Down, and oh, my soul so weary. When troubles come and my heart burdened be, am still and wait here in silence till you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be.
Thoughts?
We're all crying now.
Yeah, yeah, really. Why, Anna?
Well, hell, that's it's very human. It's very touching.
It is.
It's more important than sport. I mean, it's more about how we'd react in any situation in the world that's not necessarily sport related. It's about supporting and being supported. And but in your case, in your example, it's really that I would presume the father realizes the dedication and impact that this event has, and you know, wanted it to be a success for him. Really beautiful.
Other comments? Some of the others? What are your reactions, and what do those reactions, if anything, say to you about you or about what's important?
To me, it talks about commitment, how committed he was, that, you know, and all the work he put, I imagine, before that moment, that he decided that no matter what, he was going to finish.
Okay. Yeah, he certainly had that commitment. He was going to finish. Anything else?
Yeah, I think that we have all struggled with failure. And the point is that even if we try to get up by ourselves, it's always, we always rise stronger with others to support us.
Great. Anything else?
Yeah, one thing I'd add, and I show this to my sports psychology class, this exact same video. I teach a sports psychology class at the high school level. And we used to watch this, which is very inspirational, even for these teenage kids. But what it points out to me is the father loves his son unconditionally. It doesn't matter the result. The father loves his son no matter what. And that's a very powerful statement, that if athletes realize that their significant others, hopefully even including their coach, is going to care about them, win or lose, that can be a very powerful statement and very inspiring for the athlete.
Yeah. You know, I couldn't say it better myself. What hit me in that, and part of what, you know, I realize is I spent a lot of my life competing for my father. You know, and that was in part because I felt that's what I needed to do to earn his love. And so I run into athletes all the time who they really aren't competing for themselves. They're competing for the love of their parents or somebody else. And yeah, they may be good and they get rewarded and they enjoy it and that kind of stuff, but they also have their lives affected at times by virtue of the fact that the people pay attention to them when they're winning and they don't pay attention to them when they're losing. And their ability to trust that somebody cares about them when they're a loser, it just isn't there. And so for Derek, in my mind, and at least for me through him, one of the things he learned in that was that, you know, that Olympic medal, I'm sure his father was every bit as committed to his son being successful as he was. Maybe even more so. Maybe he was living through his son. A lot of parents do. So it wasn't that the Olympic medal, and Derek must have known that his success in the Olympics was really important to his father. And so when he fell down on the track, he wasn't just letting himself down, he was letting his father down and everybody else. And in spite of the fact that it's a physical injury. But what he saw in his father's actions was the kind of love that most of us really would like to be able to feel. And when you hear athletes talk about great coaches that they've had real good relationships with, that's what they've felt, I think, in part from that coach. That kind of unconditional acceptance. The coach knows me, warts and all. He's seen me choke, he's seen me do this, he still cares about me. He's still there in my corner. And those relationships, you know, are really important, especially when we're down, because I think most of us can find the strength that we need. When we can't find it in ourselves, we can find it in the love or concern that we have for somebody else. And great coaches have found that. The halftime Newt Rockne win one for the Gipper speech basically appeals to the team and lets the players in the team know, you know, you guys are feeling beaten and all this kind of stuff. Here's a guy who died, you know, for you guys, would be willing to die for you guys. And suddenly you find a bit more strength as a function of that. It's often easier for athletes to find that strength than it is when they're ready to give up to find it by some kind of commitment to the team or to their friends or that kind of stuff. But what athletes, and what part of what Herb was saying is especially difficult in pro sport. You know, who do you have in your corner? We're all weak. You know, I would like to be able to be that kind of unconditionally caring for every athlete, every person that I work with, but I'm human and I can't. And it becomes important for me to know, you know, what am I willing to give? What can I give? What can they trust me for? And it's important for them to know that too. With all of your relationships, who can I rely on for the things that I need when I'm down? And so we need to be able to give you know, that kind of thing a thought, a lot of thought, especially with the people that we work with. You know, what can they trust me for? When am I in their corner? Questions, reactions?
That's awesome.
All right, well, if you have questions, we're at the end of our time. You know, like I said, I'm gonna be back next week. We can carry on from here. If you have questions, if this makes you think over the week and there are issues or specifics that you want to deal with, please email them to me. I can go back to that slide if you didn't take down my email before. Let me do that. I think I can go back to it. Let's go. Yeah, my email there at the bottom of that slide. And I'll do my best to try and respond to them. You know, they can be questions about any of the stuff we've talked about, or, you know, just issues that you have for yourself or whatever that you're willing to share with the rest of the people here, whether it has to do with preparation as an athlete, whether it has to do with your job as a sports psychologist, whatever. Okay?
Hey, one thing before you go, and that is when you were talking about the when you're not feeling okay and you're point, I coach tennis, so to me it's a point. Golf pre-shot, but either way, when you're not feeling okay, you're saying to get out of that anxiety loop to go to a physiological cue. Is that your point of center of mass?
Yeah, what I would do is, you know, if I'm not feeling okay, is I would let's say you're serving, all right?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so I've stepped up to the service line for whatever reason. I'm feeling a bit anxious or I'm not feeling right.
Okay.
If prior to that point in time, I have learned how my weight is normally distributed when I'm standing there at the line. So I could sit there and I could say to you, okay, well, I know I have 70% of my weight on my left foot and 30% on my right foot as I'm getting ready to serve. You know, then what that athlete does to break that internal loop of I'm just not feeling well, they've got something specific that they can direct their attention to, which is making that adjustment in their weight. They step up to the line, they make sure that's adjusted, and then you as the coach give them that technical, tactical cue that's most relevant for initiating the point. And like I say, for me, that would be probably the height of the ball toss, or, you know, something that has to do with the ball toss.
You know, well, you're right on about the ball toss in tennis. Hey, where does the breathing come in?
Okay.
Because to me, the breathing can calm you down if you take kind of a clear out breath. How do you see that fitting in?
Yeah. Well, when you step up to the line to get ready to do your serve, and you're checking your weight distribution, if you take a deep breath, and what you want to do is you want to exhale and relax until you feel your body settle into the position. Okay, so the weight, and so that you feel comfortable where you feel it's a comfortable position, and that's how you coordinate that with your breathing right there at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. See you guys next week. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob.